Okay, welcome to Black Belt Interviews. This is Master David Hodson, and I'm very pleased and proud, and it's an honour and a privilege to be speaking to Grandmaster Brad Shipp from New Jersey. Fantastic. And this interview is in the presence of Supreme Master BOK-MAN Kim.
Yeah. Also, some pronounce it the other way, Kim BOK-MAN, so both are acceptable.
As I say, it's an honour and a privilege to speak with you and hear about the organisation and the Supreme Master and the history and all the relevance to Taekwondo and the whole journey and life of a pioneer of Taekwondo.
Yeah, it's quite interesting.
Yes, I mean, you did share some information with me. I'm very grateful for that. But there'll be many listeners that probably don't know these things just yet. But are you able to tell us how Supreme Master began? I understand it's in 1941.
Yeah.
Age 7.
So, you have to understand the background, to Master Kim growing up. It was under the Japanese occupation, and it was very dangerous. Even as a schoolboy, going to school, he witnessed many of his friends getting beaten up or even killed. And so self-defense was very important. And his grandmother arranged for him to secretly train with a guy by the name of Mr. Lee. And that's really all he knows about him, other than he was a Korean and he was part of an independent army. And he agreed with Master Kim's grandmother to teach him how to defend himself. So at 7 years old, he was learning how to run up and down the mountains, because that was a very important part of survival, knowing, how to escape and how to navigate through the mountains. And the training consisted of jumping over trees, small trees, to build your jumping ability, kicking and punching the trees, as targets, and practicing your blocks and strikes that you were taught. So it was a very simple, basic training, but, very fundamental, to his martial art training.
Yeah.
And
wow.
It was interesting to note that, he never knew when his teacher was coming. So sometimes he would have class multiple times in 1 week, and sometimes he would go months without seeing him. And, that instilled in him the necessity to practice on your own and to continually practice routinely, whether your instructor is there or not.
Yes.
You get that over for yourself.
So what was the basis of this martial art? Are you aware of what that might have been?
We don't really have a name for this martial art, because that wasn't something that came around until later. So it was self-defense. It was army tactics. It was training from a soldier. Yeah. And the blocks didn't have names, the kicks didn't have names. There weren't any forms really to practice. It was, this is how you defend yourself.
Yes, absolutely. It's such a young age, but obviously such a real life application for what you're learning.
And I think what's really important is that this training had to be in secret, even from other members in his family, because under the Japanese occupation, you weren't allowed to practice Korean martial arts or participate in any Korean culture. So at the time, anybody who was receiving martial arts instruction was usually karate. So it was rare for someone to be trained in the martial arts but not have any Japanese influence. And that really helped him later on with the formation of Taekwondo.
Yeah, 100%. And quite risky, I imagine, to do something that wasn't...
You could be killed. Your family could be.
Yeah. Wow. Incredible times. And but he managed to keep training, getting taught all along the way. And then what would have been another significant event after that, with that, as you're growing up in Korea?
Yeah. So, he joined the army early. He joined the army in 1950, quit high school in order to fight in the war. And so I would say, people ask about his rank and what belt. And, he never had a belt. There was no belt system at all. So that really wasn't a thing then. And when he joined the army, his friend, Han Chak-yo, asked him to participate in a demonstration. It was for the grand opening of a Changdeokwan branch in Daejeon City. So this is like 1954. And Master Kim had to borrow a uniform and a white belt from his friend in order to participate in the demonstration. So, you know, that was the first time he had ever used a uniform or a belt. So it's quite interesting.
So yeah, like you say, how do you define a rank at that time?
Right. There was no such thing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And am I right in thinking he listed early for the army,
Yeah.
early in the national age limit?
Yes. So, you know, that's a funny story because, you know, he had to quit high school and he had to travel to go to the recruiting center. And originally, he just wanted to be a police officer. He wanted to work locally in his village and help the people where he was as a police officer. But he missed the cutoff date. So the only thing that he was allowed to join was the army.
Right.
And when he got in the army line, and he was refused by the recruiter because he wasn't old enough. So he got in a different one. And until he found a recruiter that was willing to let him join, because he wouldn't take no for an answer. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
He was very happy that he was not going home and he was joining the army. And that's the kind of person we need. And they stamped and approved for him to join early.
Wow.
But, you know, I don't think that was too uncommon at the time. I've heard stories of, you know, 14 and 15-year-olds in the North Korean army that were, you know, that were recruited, you know. So I'm not sure that was, you know, that rare in that time, because soldiers were needed.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So that spirit, that's been evident throughout Supreme Master's life.
You know, a lot of people say he's too hard of a teacher, too strict, but when he learned, you had to learn to survive. It wasn't a fun sport that you did or something that you did like you do your baseball practice, you do soccer, and you do Taekwondo.
Yeah.
This, you know, something that you had to learn for survival. And when he teaches class, he's teaching you to save your life.
Yeah.
So if people are saying, you know, why are you so hard on my son? It's because he saw, you know, some very bad things when he was a kid, and he still thinks he has to protect these children on their way to school, and doesn't understand school in a suburban neighborhood. And, you know, they don't really understand danger. I mean, they might get bullied or something like that, but they're safe. So it's hard to understand sometimes where he's coming from when teaching.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. I can relate to that, because obviously I'm a Taekwondo teacher. We teach children. It's part of an interest to begin with. It's a hobby. It's a pastime, and quite far removed from the actual face-to-face, real-life situations. But
Right.
You say the pioneers, the beginners, this is where it came from. This is where it forged. And this is what we practice, like in a different way somewhat. So he enlisted in the army and became quite successful in the army. Was he teaching combat, unarmed combat at that time, or?
You know, he was only in basic training for about 6 weeks, and then sent to war. Right. So immediately he had battle experience. So he kind of took charge with his troops, and when there was downtime, let's practice, you know, self-defense. And so, you know, the weapons they were issued, a knife, they were issued a bayonet. Some people had a handgun. So, you know, these were the weapons that they needed to train with, as well as empty hand, you know. So whenever there was a downtime, he would get a group of people together and start training them and working. And eventually, you know, I don't want to get too far ahead, but after meeting General Choi and developing a relationship, he started teaching, you know, units and units of soldiers. And then eventually, you know, was only teaching the top instructors that were being prepared to be sent around the world to promote Taekwondo. Yeah. All of the top instructors, Riki Ha, Kwan Jae Hwa, Park Jung Soo, all these guys had to pass through Master Kim's hand before they were allowed to go out and represent Taekwondo internationally.
Wow. Yeah, so it's obviously a very immediate skill level, and a way of teaching that became evident fairly early on within his experience within the army. would you say?
Yeah, I mean, he loved fighting, you know,
Right.
and even during lunchtime, you know, guys would line up and he would go one after the next, just continuous sparring, and, you know, loved training
Yeah.
and was a natural athlete. So, you know, at a young age, he was a really promising soccer player, you know, and
Okay.
could have, from his family's, you know, perspective, you know, could have went in a professional soccer player route, you know, but
Yeah.
because of times and the necessities, you know, he
Yeah.
went a way, but he was still able to use that athletic ability and, you know, just timing, power, accuracy, all of those things that make you, you know, a good martial artist. He had those.
Yeah. Yeah. And not a large gentleman. Average height,
Yeah,
average size, would you say?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
5'8", 5'9",
Okay.
140, 150, maybe. Yeah,
Powerful.
very powerful.
Yeah.
Powerful. Yeah. So, you know, I've heard lots of stories, you know, about developing power and it's training, it's practice, it's putting the hours in. And he said, you know, he would challenge with his friends who had the best turning kick, or they would kick the bag and, you know, see who would have will generate the most power. And with the high jump kicks, you know, he would set a goal. And if he didn't kick a certain height, he wouldn't eat. And he would go
Wow.
without eating. He
Wow.
reached, you know, that certain goal that he had set for himself. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, the training was intense, and, you know, it was a love for the martial arts and a you know, a necessity at the time.
Yeah. Of course. Of course. Yeah. So in the field of war, these are the things that himself and his fellow soldiers relied upon
That's right.
and had to use. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, this is an important thing to mention, is that Taekwondo was first a martial art or a military art and then became a sport. So this was a killing art that became a sport.
Yeah.
And a lot of people now, they only train the sport side, which is fine, because we need that, and we need that popularity, and we need that recognition for the art. But if you're not studying the self-defense side and the martial arts side, you have to realize you're only studying a fraction of what Taekwondo is, maybe 20% of what Taekwondo is. And Taekwondo is defense against an empty hand person, unarmed person. It's defense against a person with a weapon. And it's also defending yourself with a weapon. And these are all important parts of Taekwondo that can't be lost, you know,
Yeah.
that have to be
Sure.
preserved, have to be taught to the next generation. And, you know, General Choi and Master Kim always had different views on whether weapons should be part of Taekwondo. And, you know, the general felt that it was only for soldiers, that the civilians didn't need it,
Yeah.
you know, and Master Kim has a different view of, you know, this is martial arts. Why are you not going to give 100% and only give them a percentage of what is Taekwondo? And that book that you were showing earlier,
Yeah.
every demonstration from the very first time Taekwondo is demonstrated in the Korean Army until later Vietnam, Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia, always weapon demonstrations, because these demonstrations were for the army.
Yeah.
And this is what made Taekwondo popular at that time. You know, now we have, you know, a lot of other weapons, bombs,
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
thing. But at that time, the bayonet, the knife, the pole, the sword, all of these were very practical means of self-defense.
Yeah. Yeah. And the skill to be able to defend against them, was that something Master Kim was able to develop himself, or was he learning that from somebody? Or
You know, this is something that, like I said, the only formal training he had was Mr. Lee.
Yeah.
From old until the end of World War II. You know, he just stopped coming. So they don't know, you know, maybe something happened to him. You know, it was 1945 that he just didn't come. So he had basic training in the army. And then from there, it's real life experience from the battlefield. This
Yeah.
is how the standing. This is how the guy's holding the weapon. What are his options for attack? What are my options for defense? And it was through success in battle and then going back and teaching the soldiers, look, if the guy has this weapon and he's standing like this is what he's going to do. I know because I've seen, I know what they've been taught. And so they developed the techniques based off of their personal experiences in the battlefield.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like he was learning from a teacher. He was learning from his enemy.
Experience, yeah, 100%. Yeah. So I'm just thinking here that I must give myself quite a high intellect to be able to decide these things.
This, he talks about education a lot, and he respected a lot of people because of their education. Especially General Choi was, very well educated, and his language skills were good, his writing skills were good, and Master Kim, respected him highly because of that. And unfortunately, Master Kim wasn't given the opportunity to go to school.
Wow.
He joined the army, but he's very smart and he's very intuitive and has common sense. And many times, soldiers would come into the army from one of the top military schools, and they were very well educated, but they weren't soldiers. And they would be so nervous, they would pull a pin on a grenade and they would freak out and they would drop the grenade and kill themselves, or they were in battle and they would freeze and not be able to protect themselves. So even though he respected people who came into the army that had a good education, sometimes the common sense served you much better on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And having good intuition and having good survival skills were more important than a formal education.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So, that was his view on education.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And so obviously this was occurring, wasn't it? The Korean War.
Yeah, sorry. Can we just wait? Yeah.
The ship is almost over.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry about that.
That's okay, no problem. So yeah, this is the Korean War we're talking about.
That's right.
Yeah. So then obviously he's occupied with doing the task of defending the country until the ceasefire.
That's right.
Yeah.
So after, right before the ceasefire, Master Kim got injured. There was a bomb that exploded nearby, and he had shrapnel all in his left hip and blew out his eardrum. So he was transferred to Daejeon City Hospital. And it's kind of a coincidence that this happened because Daejeon City is where General Choi was. So maybe if that injury wouldn't have occurred and he wasn't sent to that hospital, who knows what direction, things would have went.
Yeah.
But, he was, he recovered well in the hospital. And then it was shortly after, during his recovery, that there was the ceasefire. And he was stationed as security at the hospital because it was over 3,000 patients there. It was highly overrun, not enough, staff. And so some get unruly, and Master Kim was good at keeping control, of the hospital and keeping everything, running smoothly.
Yeah. But it was there that he met General Choi.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I talked about the demonstration. So once he had recovered, he was working at the hospital, and that's when he was invited by his friend Han Chak-yo to participate in this demonstration. And that was the first time before the demonstration, right? He was in line with the other demonstration team members, and General Choi came in with head of the Odokwon, the army gym, Grandmaster Sun Duck-sun accompanied him, as along with Nam Tae-hee. So the three of them came in and shook hands with all of the demonstration team members and thanked them for their participation. And saw Master Kim, oh, who are you? What belt are you? Where did you come from? And he was asking several questions. And Master Kim told him that, he only has Korean teachers, and that he didn't really have an organization. He didn't have a belt, and he just very hard. And he was excited to perform. And the general saw something in him. Master Kim intrigued him because of his background, because most people had karate experience, not Korean lineage like he had. So he said, I want to talk to you more. He said, I want to arrange another meeting so we can speak more. So, right away, there was like this instant connection between the two of them that, later led to future interactions and working together.
Yeah. Well, what age was Master Kim at this time? Approximately.
It was 1954. So right. 20 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, 20 years old.
Yeah, so it's
quite young.
Very young. Yeah. But what life experience up to that point already?
Exactly. Yeah,
so
exactly.
They have this meeting, and like you say, this chemistry,
right,
between the two, and they have future conversations and meetings.
Yeah. So Master Kim was very excited to be able to meet with the general again, and so he prepared a list of questions that he wanted to ask the general, and he was prepared for this meeting. So not only did the general want to know about him, he wanted to know about Taekwondo and what the general's plans were moving forward with this new martial art. So they met for a second time, and Master Kim asked him a lot of questions, mainly about having our own national martial art, free from the Japanese, martial art that would be accepted by the sports association, by the government sports association, and something that they could all unify together under one national martial art and present this to the world.
Yeah.
And I think the general is very surprised by Master Kim's questions, that he, because of his lower rank in the army, surprised that he was thinking about these things. And he actually got angry, like, why are you asking such things? And, what makes you, think of this sort of thing? So he's angry at the questions. And also, Master Kim didn't know that the general had karate experience.
Right.
So saying how he hates, Japanese karate, and he wants nothing to do with it. And he doesn't want any Japanese influence in our own national martial art. We cannot use their stances. We cannot use their kicks. We cannot use their terminology. We have to create our own. This is to create our own national identity. And it was something that he felt very strong about at a very young age. And that really interested the general. And no matter how upset he got with Master Kim, he would always call him back later, further discuss, these options once he cooled down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because of the similarity with how they were feeling about the nationalism of their own country and bringing it back to the fore. And
right. Master Kim told me a story that in one of their later meetings, the general pulled out karate books, and Master Kim said, either throw those away or burn them, or I'm leaving. I don't want to, I'm not going to even stay for this meeting. And he said, well, we need a reference. We need something. And Master Kim said, get medical books, get anatomy books, and let's reference those when we're trying to categorize our techniques and name them. And they came up with the inner form, they came up with outer form, they came up with forefists, they came out with the side fist, the knife, the inner knife, all this terminology where in the past it had been, like cat stance and monkeys, all of these things that were animals or something that was not practical. And so he had a strong influence in naming and coming up with these ways of describing our techniques, which they didn't have before.
Wow. Yeah. We're kind of used to that now, aren't we? With that,
right?
Calling your manuals, we talk forearm all the time. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, is Master Kim was there in 1963 in Malaysia to write these manuals. You know, the general only called two people, Master Kim and Master Kim's best friend. And he said, come to Malaysia and we're gonna write the text for the first Taekwondo book. Because before that, Master Kim had already suggested we need training manuals for the army, for the soldiers.
Yeah.
And he had a hand in implementing the very first training manuals for the army to train the soldiers. So this was just an extension of that.
Yeah. And this occurred in Malaysia, like you say, 1963.
1963. So when Master Kim arrived in Malaysia, he started work on the book the same day. There was no welcome to Malaysia, let's go sightseeing, comfortable. It's, you're here, let's get to work. And, you know, there was a lot of arguing at that time because Master Kim respected the general because of his education and because of his high military rank. But Master Kim saw himself as the senior when it came to traditional Korean martial arts. So he had no problem talking to the general in a matter-of-fact way when it was regarding Taekwondo, only regarding Taekwondo. And he could have discussions with him that other people couldn't. And even though they would fight, it was always for the betterment and advancement of Taekwondo. It was never a personal thing. He respected the general. He looked at him as a mentor, even maybe as a father-like figure, but he had to express his vision for Taekwondo, even if that meant going against the general's thoughts and wishes and plans. And so he got scolded many times. He got hit with a little stick or something and told to kicked out of the office. And Master Kim said, "Thank you, sir." And he left, go have a cigarette, and the general would cool down and say, "Get in here." And they'd go back to work. Right. So, you know, not many people understand the relationship that they had. And a lot of people say, how can you talk bad about the general when it's nothing bad? Disagreements is how discussion and debate is how we move forward. And that's how we educate ourselves. So it was a very important process. And there were too many people that would just say, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, but they had nothing to contribute. Why do we need those kind of people? We need somebody that has a vision. We need somebody that has experience and knowledge to create this and not just go along with anything.
Yeah. I guess it's part of that creative process, like you're saying, the chemistry between the two, the passion, the thoughts, they're going to collide.
Right. They both have strong tempers and they both have very strong visions. Yeah. So, you know, those kind of people are gonna have their disagreements, but it was always in the beginning time, it was always about Taekwondo. You know, later on, Master Kim talks about how the general started to give him trouble, and the general started to block him from being able to promote Taekwondo because Master Kim was gaining his own popularity, and he was gaining his own invitations by presidents and by prime ministers and by the Sultan, personal invitations to come and promote Taekwondo. Yeah. And I think, you know, the general was, we could say, a little bit jealous and felt maybe losing control a little bit, and started to give Master Kim trouble and, you know, revoke his visas for traveling, for doing demonstrations, and telling certain instructors not to participate on his demonstration team. So, you know, there started to get some conflicts and started to become personal and not for the betterment and advancement of Taekwondo.
Okay, yeah. So did their relationship break down completely, or?
You know, never completely. You know, there was always that attachment that, you know, maybe we can work together sometime in the future. So they started to drift apart, and Master Kim started to do his own thing. And that's when, you know, he decided to write his own book, Practical Taekwondo. And this was really like the first separation of Taekwondo. You know, we have the ITF, and this is before the WTF. This is before there was really any splitting. So Master Kim, you know, went on his own very early. and started to promote his own version of Taekwondo, which later developed into Chungun Taekwondo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe just before we go forward, are you able to say who was taught by Master Kim in the early days? You mentioned some people.
So many.
Right.
Han Chak-yo was one of his best friends, and students. And also Wu Jae Lim was one of his training partners that he really, trained with and competed with in terms of techniques. I think in the UK, you guys are interested to hear about Riki Ha. That was, he was assigned to Master Kim. Master Kim was his instructor. He had a judo background, and Master Kim said he was a little bit overweight. And he said, if you can lose some weight, you'd be amazing. And I think Grandmaster Ha, Riki Ha, he saw Master Kim's practical application. Judo guys couldn't throw Master Kim, just upset punch to the lower spine when they turn their back, or because judo is a sport, so there's certain things that are illegal.
Yeah.
So in the Army, we're talking about martial arts. So one thing is, he prided himself is he could beat all the judo guys. They were limited to their techniques in terms of rules, but so many, many, pretty much anybody who was an early pioneer or left Korea to teach Taekwondo passed by him.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Master Nam Tae-hee.
Nam Tae-hee, yeah. Master, in the Army, reported to him as his senior.
Yeah.
So that was his commanding officer. But in terms of Taekwondo, there are many people who were his senior in the Army, but were not his senior when it came to Taekwondo. Right. He had many colonels and many captains in his classes. Yeah. And he explained, during this class, I'm the boss.
Right. Yeah.
And when the class is over, you're the boss. That's on.
And that's similar to our Taekwondo classes today, isn't it? We've got CEOs and lawyers, doctors.
That's right. Professionals in their own right.
Yeah. It's the level of the martial art, isn't it, that changes that.
Right.
Wow. So then, like you mentioned, the beginning of his own federation.
Right. So he started in Hong Kong and wrote Practical Taekwondo, and was still promoting Taekwondo. Okay. And I think one thing that's important to note is that Master Kim was never political. He never saw these different divisions, such as World Taekwondo and International Taekwondo, as I have to choose one. Dr. Eun-Young Kim approached Master Kim several times to organize the third Asian Taekwondo Championships. And even though this was a World Taekwondo event, Master Kim always looked at it as Taekwondo, promoting Taekwondo in general, no matter political affiliation. And he ran such a successful championship, and in reality taught Dr. Eun-Young Kim, and gave him many connections, with different countries to be able to participate in these tournaments, and chairmen of CEOs that can sponsor these type of events, and the locations that we can hold these type of events in different countries. And Master Kim gave all of that contact information to Dr. Eun-Young Kim, and really helped World Taekwondo to become an Olympic sport. We were just looking over some of his notes, and he has a press release notes from 1977, where he's talking about, our goal is to make Taekwondo an international sport, and to one day reach the level of Olympic sports. Right. And I'm reading this, in front of Master Kim, and Taekwondo is on the Olympics on the TV right behind us, and because of him, he had that goal way back before anybody was thinking that, and to see it on paper you know, from
Yeah.
1977 and to see where we are today and know that he played such an integral role of getting us there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important for us to hear that as well. With the formation of Taekwondo, maybe just before here, I've got the 15 patterns written down. There's 24 patterns in Taekwondo,
right,
but 15 of them, they evolved in groups, didn't they? There was 4, I believe, at the beginning, and then they expanded.
So, you know, when they were in Singapore, 1963, and they're working on the Taekwondo book, they needed patterns that they could teach, and they needed their own patterns. So there were some patterns like Hwarang and Chungmu that have been around for a long time and maybe have been evolved from Japanese patterns. But you know, we talked about this extensively. Chunji and Tangun, the very first 2 patterns, Master Kim created himself in Malaysia in 1963, and he practiced them over and over and over and refined them and then showed them to the general for approval. And, you know, there were little tweaks in the form, you know, that the general wanted to make and like his stamp of approval. But those 2 patterns, 100% he created himself and was the first to start teaching those patterns. Yeah. As soon as he left Singapore, went back to Korea, they're teaching right away. And they're already teaching them there in Singapore. So a signature, if you can tell if Master Kim created these patterns, the early patterns, is his emphasis on left and right. So if you do it on the left side, you do it on the right side. If you do it with your left foot, you do it with your right foot. And there's a symmetry between the 2 sides. Yeah. And you can see that in the first 2 patterns. You can see that you can see that in Wanyo. And then when you see a pattern like Chungmu, you know, where you're starting one way and then you go the other way and it's different, and you don't repeat those moves on the other side, that's not a pattern that Master Kim made. Right. That's a that was made by someone else. Yeah. And so, you know, he had a strong hand in creating some of the patterns, but not all of them. Yeah. And you know, he exited the ITF before the patterns were completed. So, you know, of course, a lot of the higher level black belt forms, he didn't have a, you know, a hand in those. Sure. So probably about Gaebek, Yuam, you know, level around there is where they were. And, you know, forms were created, and then where they were put was changed later on. Yeah, I've seen this. Might have had a higher level pattern that they were going to use earlier, and they ended up pushing it back. Yeah. Yes. So in some of the earlier manuals, would we see Master Kim's picture or not? So here's what happened. The relationship started to deteriorate a little bit in 1963 in the creation of the book. And from Malaysia, General Choi was going to Germany to promote Taekwondo there with Kwan Jae Hwa and some of the other pioneers. And Master Kim had recommended these guys to him. And he said, you take these guys, you go there and promote Taekwondo. I want to stay more in Asia and Southeast Asia. And he had an invitation to go to Hong Kong. So he went to Hong Kong, and these guys continued on with the book. So Master Kim wasn't there for a lot of the photos. Yeah, that was done at a later time back in Korea. But because of the disagreement that they had, he told the general to take every single photo of his out of the book. So they did have a lot of photos, especially in the back, maybe some of the group photos or some of the earlier demonstrations. You will not see any photos of Master Kim in that book because he told the general, take me out. So I think there's one photo of Master Kim because he's in a group photo and they didn't find it, take it out. But, you know, he wrote the book, you know, he had a strong hand in writing the book, but then, you know, people go, well, where's his pictures? And that's why, because the text was done at one time and the photos later. And I think, you know, Master Kim's grandfather got sick while they were in Malaysia, and he asked to leave and go visit, and he wasn't allowed to leave to go visit his grandfather who passed away. And later on, you know, just there were certain things that were starting to drive them apart.
Right.
And
yeah, sure. And but from there, like you said, that Master Kim had already, from what we were speaking about earlier, has got his own federation that's beginning, it's influencing, and there's even the idea of being in the Olympics at a very early time. So this was starting to spread around the world also. In the countries, particular countries that Master Kim's martial art, Taekwondo, was forming.
You know, Taekwondo was first introduced to Vietnam in 1959. And this was the very first time Taekwondo had left Korea. So this is a historic moment for Taekwondo to be represented outside of Korea. And like I mentioned, the team went from Vietnam to Taiwan, and eventually to Singapore, Malaysia, Brunei, all of these countries. And, you know, at these demonstrations, there were many embassy leaders from other countries. So when they performed in Vietnam, that's where, because of the success of the demonstration, they were invited to another country, because there was someone from another country's embassy that said, we need this in our country. We need this martial art. We need this self-defense. So most of these countries were preparing for war, or were just coming out of a war, and needed these practical techniques. So from the success of one demonstration, they were introduced to other countries and received other invitations. And, you know, the invitations for demonstrations were coming in, but there were no people to send. There were no black belts to send. There were no instructors to send. You know, it was very early in Taekwondo creation. So, you know, Master Kim was traveling and doing as much as he could, and General Choi was, you know, off on another part, you know, spreading Taekwondo the best that they could. So those early demonstrations is what really, you know, caused Taekwondo to just explode worldwide. And these press conferences that Master Kim hosted that were televised worldwide and that went on the radio worldwide. So for the first time, people around the world are hearing this word Taekwondo because of these early demonstrations. And like I said, they were military demonstrations by invitation of presidents and government leaders, military leaders.
So what would be the kind of thing people would see at those demonstrations?
If you look in that book,
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
we've got patterns being demonstrated. We've got breaking of the roof tiles, and, you know, high jump kicks and flying kicks, and then we've got the real self-defense. You know, attacks with a bayonet, attacks with a knife, defense against a sword, things that the army needed to know. And these are things that, you know, Master Kim and, you know, his soldiers had developed through war experience. Yeah. Very practical, not the flashy demonstrations that you see now, people spinning in the air and breaking the boards way up and all the flash. And it was none of that. It was very techniques that were needed by the army for self-defense. Yeah. You know, but at the same time showing the athletic skill that these guys had, you know, through their breaking and that sort of thing. And Master Kim would be integral in those demonstration teams. He wouldn't be on the outside. Oh man, he would show me the programs. You know, I'm looking at the programs, and let's say there's 26 items that are on there on the program. He would be in more than half or 3. And you know, he'd love to be out there and demonstrating, but you know, they'd be like, okay, I'm gonna rest, so we'll put, you know, this item in, and then I can do this, and then I need to rest, so put these guys in. And you know, he would create the programs for the demonstrations and love to perform. Wow. And the use of these weapons, they're often live blades or dummy blades for training with? These were real. Right. And you know, he told me one time during a demonstration with the bayonet, he went to dodge and the knife went through his uniform like this. And everybody in the stadium thought for sure he had got stabbed, you know, and everybody went crazy, you know, when they saw that he had just barely gotten out of the way. So I think what made these demonstrations so exciting is it was real. These were the weapons they were carrying on the side. These were the weapons they actually used. These weren't a prop for a demonstration. And a lot of times, you know, when they traveled, he was telling me when they went to Taiwan, you didn't bring breaking boards. You get there and there's certain things that you need, but you didn't have. And he said the wood that they brought for those demonstrations is not like what we have now. You know, it had a lot of sap and they were thicker and they would break, but then you'd have to rip them apart. They didn't snap in half like the nice boards that are manufactured for us now. This was down and cut down a tree and made something for them to break. You know, so even the boards were real, you know.
You never knew what you was going to get, I guess, when you turned up.
Right, exactly.
Wow. So this was something he enjoyed immensely: traveling, performing,
being an ambassador to Taekwondo,
spreading the Korean culture.
That's right.
Korean way of life, nationalism. So this would have gone on.
I mean, all his life and still now.
Yes.
He's still traveling. He's still teaching. You know, he's still doing seminars, and all over the world. You know, just you know, it was in 2009 that, you know, I was appointed as technical director for the Changwon Taekwondo Federation, and he brought me to Korea to do a series of lectures and demonstrations on Taekwondo. And it went really well, the two of us being a team and traveling. And I mean, we went to Singapore, we went to Malaysia, we went to the Netherlands, we went to Russia, to Puerto Rico, all over the US, to the Czech Republic, you know, and he just wanted to improve the quality of Taekwondo around the world. And, you know, that's what he's always done. And I think something that's honorable to mention is that the uniform that he wore was white with black trim, just like he wore in the army. And he was always open to everyone. So he wasn't wearing an emblem on his chest and promoting himself or his martial art. He was there as an ambassador of Taekwondo for everyone, regardless of your style or political affiliation. Find something that you can learn, you know, and that's always been my goal when we travel somewhere. If you're stuck in your way of doing patterns, we have our own patterns, you know, and there's a reason for that. But maybe we have something that you don't have. So you don't have to give up your patterns or change your patterns, but you don't have this weapon defense, or you don't have this defense against a throw, or you don't have, you know, something curriculum wise that we can enhance your Taekwondo without branching into other styles and, oh, we're going to teach you jujitsu or we're going to teach you something else. No, this is all Taekwondo. And, you know, maybe that group or organization doesn't have 100% of the curriculum that Taekwondo is meant to be, and we can help those people. And there's certain standard fundamentals that go across the board, no matter what style of Taekwondo you are. A side kick is a side kick, a turning kick is a turning kick. And, you know, we can train those things together and help each other to improve our standard of kicking. You know, we may cross our hands different ways and perform our blocks different ways, but there's certain timing, power, accuracy that is universal, you know, and those kind of things we can teach in our seminars and not turn away anybody because we can find common ground. And I think that's, you know, what the next generation of Taekwondo we need to focus on, is being able to work together and promote Taekwondo, not be so worried about ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I totally understand what the kind of things you're saying, is because it helps us to look a little bit further. And if you go back in history, you see it was there in the first place. It's what you're explaining,
right?
Master.
We've had and this type of self-defense as long as recorded history. You know, we always look for an advantage in the fight.
So it's kind of a widening the circle of your influence, furthering one's knowledge, understanding more,
That's right.
appreciating things that you might not have seen or tried before.
That's right. You know, I think really what I'd like to express to a lot of people, because Master Kim has kind of been written out of Taekwondo history, because he took his own path, you know, and has remained independent his whole life. But you know, he was there when they chose the name Odo-kwan to try to unify martial arts in the army. There were many different kwans that were, these guys were joining the army, and Master Kim was there to help name and create an Odo-kwan. So there was already a sense of unity with these guys all training under the same name. And then he was there for helping to select the name Taekwondo in the general's office. You know, he showed him all of these different names, and Master Kim said, Taekwondo, that's the one. If you don't use it, I'm using it. You know, that's the name.
Yeah.
And you know, he was there at the naming board meeting, April 11th, 1955. Master Kim was right outside the door. He was too young and didn't have high enough rank to join the meeting, but he was the general's personal assistant on the ride to Seoul, Korea, and was there with him, you know, talking about the meeting the whole way.
Yeah.
And he was the first to introduce Taekwondo outside of Korea. That was his demonstration team that went to Vietnam. And he's continued to promote Taekwondo his whole life, you know, and constantly traveling and upholding a high standard of martial arts. And, you know, one thing that he's always expressed is that we always need to advance, and we always need to keep learning and improving. And too many people are stuck on this very first book that the general wrote. And to him, this was volume 1. This was for beginners. You know, there's more. You know, why are we only, you know, just regurgitating this book over and over? We have to look beyond that. And what's the future of Taekwondo? And what is, you know, that book is a very important part of Taekwondo, but it's a very small part. And you know, Master Kim's life work is he wrote 4 volumes on Chamgan Taekwondo, and within those 4 volumes is everything, you know, 100% of the Taekwondo curriculum. And I think it's important that people stay humble and continue to train and improve themselves, because some people become an instructor or a master or even a grandmaster, and then they start to lose track of their own Taekwondo training and their own improvement, whether physically, mentally, spiritually, so that they can pass that to the next generation, you know. And too many people get comfortable with their position and they don't continue to improve and evolve. And that's what we need for Taekwondo. Technology is constantly improving. We're constantly getting better cell phones, better cars, better everything. So Taekwondo has to follow that natural evolution of improvement, you know. And I think it's important for masters and grandmasters to realize that.
Yeah, and this is work that you've helped to put together, and you're continuing to do so, I understand, with the training.
So Master Kim has written this 4 volumes, and the first one was published 20 years ago. The second volume, him and I have been working together for the past 2 years, every day to produce volume 2. And this is, you know, halfway through, and I'm working on republishing volume 1 because it's 20 years old, and on volume 3 and 4 at the same time. Hopefully, you know, each year or every couple of years, we'll have a new book come forward. You know, he was involved in the beginning with writing training manuals for the Army. He wrote 15 training manuals for school children. So this is your kindergarten Taekwondo training manual. This is your first grade Taekwondo training manual, so it can be followed with you as you go to school. And we've been very successful in adopting it in the local school districts. I go in and I teach an after-school martial art program, and I follow these training guides for the different grades, and it's a successful system that can be replicated in the schools. So you know, we have a lot still in the works to promote and advance Taekwondo worldwide. So you know, Master Kim's not going to be here forever, but his legacy will be. And you know, we want to preserve that, you know, not lose this knowledge and this wisdom that's being passed down to us.
Yeah, very much so, sir. And these are going to be available for people through the normal outlets.
Yeah, Amazon, you know, all the, you know, this is a, you know, every book store has their own ability to order the book and have it in stock,
Yeah.
you know, through arbitration, you know, through seminars, those type of things. But it's definitely available worldwide for everyone to benefit from. So Master Kim would like to say something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I can't speak too long. I cannot speak. But some other time, if I'm okay, I'd like to talk to you. So today, you two of us interview. I'm very happy. So I hope we can work together. That means nothing to lose for you. I'm sure I'm making proud for you. So anyhow, you can communication together. So anything you need, you can ask them. So we give you full details. Okay. Now
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to talk to you. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much for
Thank you so much.
your two of us operation. Okay. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Wow.
That was,
Thank you so much for that.
yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So I appreciate you reaching out to us and organizing this. I think it's very important, and the timing is really great, you know, that we can, you know, get this out and express this. So
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
No, pleasure, sir. It's been an absolute honor and privilege to be part of this. I'm so grateful that we were able to do it. I appreciate it immensely. I'm just a mere student myself. I've acquired a title, but that's more for my students. I'm just a student that's just learning every day.
Well, hopefully we all remain students and we all remain learning, because even, you know, when we were working on volume 2, you know, Master Kim said, I'm still learning. You know, this is great. These things that we're doing and we're talking about, it brings up good questions. It brings up good discussion, and everybody should still be learning. It doesn't matter how old you are or what type of experience you have. If you're not learning and you're not growing, go in the opposite direction.
Yeah, 100%. Well, sir, thank you so much for your time. I shall be spending a few hours on this shortly.
That's awesome.
As I say, it's been an honor, privilege, and I look forward to speaking to you again.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. All the best.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.